Welcome everyone! Are there any moral rules that are absolute and universal? Perhaps rules like, don't lie, don't steal, don't kill. If there are rules like this, do we allow exceptions? What if breaking one of these rules was the only way to protect yourself or protect your family? Then would it be okay? Here's a scenario. Suppose a self-driving car is about to run over and kill 5 innocent people. The only way to save the people is if the car is programmed to swerve onto the sidewalk, but a pedestrian is there who would be killed if the car swerved. Is it morally okay to program the car in this way? A lot of people might say yes. Tweak that scenario. Suppose instead of swerving, the only way to save the 5 people in the road is to push that 6th person who's on the sidewalk into the path of the self-driving car. Would you push the person? Would that be morally okay? A lot of people wouldn't. But are we being inconsistent? It seems like we would allow the death of 1 to save 5 in the first case, so why not the second? Another hypothetical. If there were an experience machine, a very sophisticated virtual reality device, and you could program it with the perfect life, would you plug in to this machine for the rest of your life? If not, what does that mean about having good experiences? Is there more to life than just happy and pleasurable experiences? Here's a question. Suppose that you have a child and that child is about to die. There's a way to save them, though. However, the way to save them, and the only way to save them, is to let 2 other children, unrelated to you, die. Would you allow those children to die? What's the maximum number of children you would let die to save your own? Is it 5? 10? 100? 1,000? 1,000,000? Is there no limit? What about human nature? Is it good, evil, somewhere in between? Is pure altruism, acting solely for the benefit of another person, possible? Or are we selfish and egoists to our core? If you were given superpowers, would you eventually abuse them? What about when no one was looking? Is there a meaning or purpose to all of this, to life? What is the good life? What does it mean to thrive and flourish? Should we pursue wealth, power, and fame? A lot of people seem to. Is life just about maximizing pleasure and happiness? Perhaps living simply is key to the good life. Or perhaps we should have a dutiful life, spent caring for others. And finally, do we have free will? If we don't, what does this mean for moral responsibility? These are the sorts of questions that we're going to address in this lecture series on ethics and moral philosophy. Let's get started. One of the things that we're going to talk about in this course is about ethics itself. What is ethics? How does it differ from other areas of philosophy, like metaphysics, or epistemology, or logic? How is ethics and philosophy in general different from other academic pursuits, like the sciences, like theology and religion? What are the limits of science? For instance, take the question, how do you engineer or program a self-driving car? Or how did these developers who made leaps and bounds in artificial intelligence, who programmed ChatGPT, how did they do it? Those questions can be answered by science, more specifically computer science. But should we build these self-driving cars? Should we mass produce this AI? Those questions, it doesn't seem like science really gives us an answer. To answer those sorts of questions, you have to think philosophically. And many of those questions end up being moral questions, questions about ethics. There's going to be a section in this lecture series on normative ethics, especially consequentialism, specifically utilitarianism, and a deontological normative ethic from a German philosopher named Immanuel Kant. In this section of the class on normative ethics, these are the sorts of questions that we're going to try to answer. For instance, the question about the experience machine, the virtual reality device. If you could program it to have a perfect life, would you plug in for the rest of your life? Because some utilitarians endorse hedonism, a view that essentially says that all that we should pursue is pleasure and pleasurable experiences, they might be committed to plugging into the machine. However, many other moral philosophers would be critical of such a decision. What makes a theory normative is if it does more than merely describe the world. Many scientific theories, if not all of them, are trying to describe how the world really is. If a theory goes over and above a description and says further, this isn't just the way the world is, this is the way the world should be, the way the world ought to be, that makes it a normative theory. So normative ethics tells us how the world should be, and more specifically, how we should behave in it. It's an attempt to answer the question, what should I do? Or what kind of person should I be? For these utilitarians, the answer is going to be, do what results in the best consequences. Do what generates the most utility. For Immanuel Kant, it's not going to be about producing good consequences. It's about intending to do things that is in accordance with moral laws that we can deduce and reason out. It's going to be about respecting each other's rights. It's going to be about not treating each other merely as some means to some end, even if that end is good. So in that section of the class, we're going to address questions like the following. If you could prevent a riot by sentencing an innocent person to prison, would that be morally justified? The question about letting other children die to prevent the death of our own child is a question we're going to ask in that section. We all love simple pleasures, a cold beverage on a hot day, an uninterrupted long night of sleep, delicious food, especially after physical exertion. But animals, non-human animals, they can enjoy all those pleasures. Do we have a duty as human beings that have these intellectual capacities, this capacity to reason at this level that we do? Do we have a duty to pursue intellectually stimulating things? Would it be a waste of our humanity if we merely pursued the sorts of pleasures that non-human animals can pursue? Do we have a duty to challenge ourselves, to pursue the finer things in life, to pursue what a utilitarian named John Stuart Mill called higher pleasures? For instance, should we push ourselves to enjoy chess over a game like checkers, to enjoy classical music and complicated music like jazz over top 40, to enjoy foreign films and classic cinema over the latest installment of whatever superhero franchise is in vogue? Or should we say, to each their own, enjoy what you like? Who is a philosopher to criticize what you like? If you want to be a bit more Philistine and just be a couch potato and eat junk food and drink cheap beer and watch TV all day, so be it. We're going to ask the question, should we judge behavior? Should we judge our actions more on intention or more on the consequences, more on the outcomes of what we do? Also in this section on normative ethics, we're going to look at the moral philosophy of the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, Aristotle's virtue ethics. And so those questions I asked earlier, what's the meaning or the purpose of life? What's a good life? What does it mean to flourish? A lot of people pursue wealth, fame, and power. Is that a dead end? Should we pursue pleasure? Should we go for happy experiences? Do we want the simple life? Do we need balance? Should we focus on duties to others? In the most theoretical part of this class, we're going to investigate an area of moral philosophy called metaethics. And one of the questions that we're going to ask is about moral motivation. What should we listen to more in our ethical decision making? Should we lean more on reason and thinking, or should we lean toward emotion and feeling? What motivates us? What should motivate us? Is it going to be more desire? Is it going to be more reason? So this area is also known as moral psychology. And then we're going to address the question that I mentioned earlier about universal or absolute or exceptionless rules. Are there such a thing as moral facts? There seem to be natural facts about the world that scientists investigate, but are there facts that are ethical or moral? We're also going to ask questions about human nature. Is human nature good? Is it bad? Is it evil? Is it somewhere in between? Is there such a thing as pure altruism? Is it possible for us to act exclusively for the benefit of someone else? Or are we just naturally selfish? The question about limitless power. If you had these superpowers, would it just be a matter of time before you abuse them and use them for selfish gain? And if your answer is no, you wouldn't abuse them, well, what about all the times when no one is looking? You get away with doing things that are not morally above water. What's the role of society in moral education, in our upbringing? Do these things tend to save us from our selfish ways, or does society have more of a corrupting influence on what we do? We're going to look at a view that's called contractarianism, or social contract theory. And one of the questions we're going to ask is, can morality exist without society? So whether it be our hunter-gatherer ancestors or in the landscape of some post-apocalyptic lawlessness, if morality isn't grounded in society or social rules, then what would be its foundation? What would be its basis? If moral rules are essentially social rules, on the other hand, who should author them? How do we get around authorship bias? We know that the people who write the rules, who author the rules, tend to write them so that they favor themselves, whether consciously or unconsciously. So instead of having real people with all their imperfections and flaws be the moral legislators, would it be better if we made them idealized and hypothetical? Then the rules that they come up with wouldn't be so biased. But then we have the epistemological problem of what rules would they come up with? There's an American philosopher named John Rawls who's going to have something to say on that matter. And then finally, we're going to do a section on moral responsibility and free will. And the big question there that I mentioned before is free will. Do we have it? And if we don't, what does this mean for moral responsibility? So I just peppered you and inundated you with all of these questions. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, but my point is to get you excited about this class and this course and this lecture series. My hope is that at least some, if not all of those questions, you were watching going, that's a good question, or I have an opinion on that, or I wonder what other people have to say about that. You can tell I get very excited about these things, and I'm looking forward to sharing all of this with you. That was quite a whirlwind. That was fun. As always, thanks for hanging out with me.